Right, welcome back to the class. Today we want to quickly review what we have discussed last week. The subject is innovation and creativity in business, and the theme of the course is to harness creativity and innovative culture. So creative and innovative culture is basically based on the approach in thinking and the habit in thinking. We started last week by trying to distinguish between creativity and logical thinking. They are complementary thinking approach. However, to most of us, we have only been exposed to logical thinking throughout our life. So creativity can be new thing. It is not really new because when we were young, at the age of 3, 5, 7, we were very creative. We were able to express our creativity. But as we grow up, the educational system, the environment have actually suppressed our creative ability. And so as we grow up, we actually lose the ability to think creatively. But the two are very important and complementary to each other. Creativity in itself will result in invention and some new ideas, and creativity plus logical thinking will result in some innovation. Invention is actually an easy thing to come up with because it is a matter of generating new ideas. But innovation is a real sweat because we have to really blend creativity with logical thinking with the objective of penetrating into the market. So you may be able to invent thousands of ideas, but unless you are able to bring those ideas into the market successfully, then you are nowhere. You are not actually progressing. Most important aspect why we need creativity, other than the logical thinking approach that we are already very strong with, is because of the change in the paradigm of thinking, and this is reflected in the new measures of management style. The new measures of management style, this is actually taken from a book called Paradigm by Dr. Joel Butter. And Dr. Joel Butter, on his research on over 3,000 companies in the US, found that actually most institutions, especially the institutions of higher learning, are still focused on the old management style, the blue oval, that is focusing on problem solving and reactive ability. So the focus is on the ability to react on situation. Whereas employers today are adopting new management style, which focus on the anticipative ability, the ability to anticipate the future, the ability to anticipate the future problem and avoid the future problem, and along the way identify opportunity from that. So while the industries are shifting towards a new paradigm, this is the yellow oval, the institutions of higher learning are still sticking on to the old paradigm, and that's become a mismatch in the education system. And now the situation is getting more serious as we are slowly migrating into the industry 4.0, where we are not only requiring each of our management team to be anticipative, but we are requiring our management team to also come up with instrument and mechanism to actually create capacity outside of our brain to help us to be more anticipative. You may ask question or react as we go along. Okay, so I mean we have been program,
Yeah.
So he's playing trick on me. Anyway, we have been discussing and deliberating about thinking. All our life we have been thinking, but do we really think? I mean, some teachers, boss, actually accuse us of not thinking when we do things. Is it true? What is thinking anyway? We will look at thinking from the logical perspective first, and this is the definitions of thinking from the logical perspective. Thinking is the process of arranging and rearranging perception. This is most important, perception and experience. So the two things that we will be arranging and rearranging, and what is the objective is to clarify our view of things. So the process of thinking is to clarify our view of things and essentially to create a new perception. So thinking is a process of creating a new perception. So when you are thinking right now, for example, about Industry 4.0, actually most of us are still puzzled. What is this Industry 4.0? I mean, of course, we have always been pounded with this perspective of Industry 4.0 is normally talking about IoT, artificial intelligence or AI, and robotic. And then to go with that, we have the big data, analytic. So depending on our exposure on this, we will still be groping, trying to understand and appreciate what is this Industry 4.0. And so when we are thinking, we will arrange and rearrange all our database. Perception, what is our perceptions of Industry 4.0 will be based on our background. To some of us who are very familiar with ICT, perhaps we know a lot more than this. Industry 4.0 is actually going to penetrate the whole of our life and actually make our life much more sophisticated than we are now. So that's perception. And then what about experience? Experience can be also another perspective. We depending also on our experience with the internet, we may have different level. So, to some of us that have very few knowledge about Industry 4.0, we will keep on trying, arranging and rearranging our perception, our limited perception and experience in trying to clarify our perception or form new perception. And in the end, we come up to perhaps a conclusion that we are more blurred about, we are more confused about this Industry 4.0. And that's when we say that we fail in our thinking. So when our boss, when our lecturer asks about this, we will not be able to answer clearly because we do not have enough perception and experience about it. So that's the issue in thinking, especially in logical thinking. And we can understand this better by looking at this from the perspective of thinking paradigm. And I am using the terms coined by Professor Dr. Edward de Bono, and he came up with a bubble. And he said that logic is based on a bubble, and this bubble actually comprised of a collection of perception and experience. So the collections of perceptions and experience will be accumulated in this bubble, comprising of our life culture, way of life, norms, regulation, whatever that we think makes sense and we are willing to adopt. So we will basically record it and keep it in our database. So this is our database, and this forms our basic logic. So whatever that we terms as logic or logical is what we have accepted here in this bubble. Okay, that's fine. So what's wrong with that? Because we live in the logical world, and if our logic that we have adopted in the form of basic perception and experience conform to the society, to the rest of the people in the community, then we are fine. We just like others. So there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is, actually each one of us has different perspective in our life. Even two twin brothers and sisters, they were born almost just second or minutes apart. They may have different exposure in thinking. Perhaps one has a habit of facing right, the other one facing left. Though they are staying in the same room, they are exposed to different perspective, and hence no two persons in this world will have the same logic base. So what's wrong with that? It's perfectly fine, but the issue is, as we grow up, we carry on this habit, and we actually accumulated different aspects of perception and experience, and in the end, and when we grow up, actually our perception and experience are different. So though we are talking about the same logic, but our logic base are actually different. So your logic base is different from my logic base, but we still term it as logical. So what is logical to you is different from what is logical to me.
It's a unique base.
Yes. Of course, there are bound to be some commonality between us. That is why we are able to live in this society. But the fact that we always argue, we always quarrel, is because our logic bubbles are different. Our logic bases are different. And when we quarrel, what we do actually, we are trying to impose our logic on our rival, on others. So basically, for example, we have a perception about certain food. For today, the argument about protein and carbohydrate is a very wide argument that actually there is no end to it. For example, and essentially, why do we argue? It's because we want to impose our logic to our rivals so that they will agree to our logic and they adopted our logic. Okay, so that's one aspect about logic. Logic is limited to the database or the logic base. Number two, this limited exposure on the logic base has made us handicapped in thinking. Just like before when we relate Industry 4.0, because of our limited exposure to the ICT, and we cannot appreciate enough about Industry 4.0 because we have never been exposed to ICT. For some who are very keen readers, they may read about Industry 4.0, and depending on which author they read, their understanding of Industry 4.0 will also be different because they would have adopted different perceptions and experience from the reading. So, our perspective of thinking in logical thinking is basically confined by the logic base. Okay, so what's wrong with that? It is perfectly okay, provided that we are willing to continue learning. Because as we get exposed to new things, we will keep on adopting new perception and we keep on adopting new experience. The problem is because the world is moving so fast, and we have been talking about this information explosion for over 20 years, I think, 2 decades. And what does it mean is that the amounts of knowledge that has been created in the last 20-30 years is so vast that nobody in this world can really cope up with the developments of knowledge, not even the professor. So what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong because we have Google to help us. And so today actually Google is our master reference. And we keep on learning new things from Google. And today I was in the seminar, and the professor was mentioning some new thing which nobody knows, and immediately everybody Google, and everybody were able to participate in the discussion. And that's the power of Google there. And alright, that's fine. But there's another problem with logical thinking, and that is with this ego. Ego is surrounding our bubble, and ego, you can define ego as the feeling of self-importance. What does that mean? It means that every one of us have ego, and every one of us want to feel that we are important in this world. We are important in the community, in the crowds of people. And because we have ego, we will keep the pride from the ego. And the problem with thinking is ego is acting as wall in our logical thinking. The ego will not allow us to go against the logic base. So for example, if we have a basic perception that money is bad, that's the basic perception because we were brought up that way, that we should not be thinking about money, we should be thinking about others and so on. And then suddenly we go to the class and they say that money is king. So we have problem. We have problem. Our teachers say money is king, and our parents say money is bad for our life, and we cannot reconcile. But what do we stick on? Is whatever that we have in our basic perception. And ego will never let us go against our basic logic. Okay, so that can be good, can be positive, but that can also be negative. What is the negative thing about it? Is that if whatever we are exposed recently or immediately are totally the opposite of our logic base, then we will find very difficult to accept it. So we will never be able to accept anything that go against the logic base. So what's wrong with that? The problem is, if somebody come up with new ideas, so let's say the new ideas is for example, the new ideas is
blockchain.
Yes, blockchain. For example, so someone suggested that let's invest in blockchain instead of share. So we are not familiar about blockchain, and our basic perception, just a bit of what we have collected from the market, from our reading and so on, we say that blockchain is very dangerous, very speculative, and Bitcoin has dropped in price from 20,000 to 8,000 in matters of hours.
So we will be more defensive.
Yes. So
accept.
it is very difficult to accept the idea of moving into blockchain currency, for example. And because of that, we will be confined to our logic base. And so for a person who strives to be creative, they may not be able to be creative enough because their creativity is confined to the logic base. But whatever is in the logic base are based on past experience, are based on perceptions that we have adopted from past experience. And if it is from past experience, it cannot be new ideas. If it is not new ideas, it cannot be creative. So as a result, we are not able to be creative because we are constrained by our logic base. And worse than that, ego is controlling our thinking, not allowing us to accept any new ideas. And that's the problem. In a meeting, we always have the situation, either the boss or the other colleague, the member of the meeting, will always find fault in new ideas, simply because ego is controlling their thinking. Agree or disagree? Yes.
Possibly.
Yes. Okay.
Unless someone is really think differently.
Yes.
They will encourage.
Yes. So this is the danger about logical thinking. Not only that you are not able to generate new idea, you will always go against new idea because your logic base will always control you, and ego will always try to prevent you from going other than the logic base. So in real fact, what we should have been doing is to try to basically be more central to our ego than all this, and ego and thinking are almost inextricably intertwined. Essentially what it means is that ego is controlling our thinking. Up to the age of 10 or 11, a child ego is separable from his thinking, and at that time thinking is enjoyable. We enjoy playing with ideas, and we are very wild in thinking. But as we grow up, after the age of 11, then ego will become part of our thinking, and we are so concerned of our self-image. We will try and avoid making mistake in front of others, and so a person become as good as his thinking. His status at school and his social standing will depend on his thinking. So we are so worried in expressing ourselves. We are worried that people will make fun of us when we make the wrong expression, when we give the wrong ideas. So as a result, we just try to stick to our logic base. And that's the problem with logical thinking. Remember, my effort here is to destroy your logic first. So after this, don't trust your logic, okay? But because of that, this is what happened. Actually, without realizing, we are stuck in this room, in this box. We cannot see outside, and we cannot see beyond the wall. And as a result, we are suffering, really. We are suffering. I mean, for those who are not strong enough, they are not willing to liberalize themselves in thinking, and so they are confined in their thinking, and they are suffering. We feel cramped in this box because we know that we are deficient, we cannot express, and we are not able to open up our mind. And then comes a paradox in creative thinking. Our parent, our boss, our teachers have been pounding on us that all creative ideas are good ideas. They encourage us to be creative. We need to promote the spirit of creative thinking. And so we need to keep on generating new ideas. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, we also now see that all new ideas are ideas beyond our logic base. If we want it to be new, it has got to be outside the logic base, because everything in the logic base are based on our past experience, based on our past perception. So the problem is these new ideas do not fit to our existing logic base. And why it does not fit is because we have never heard of it before. And so our logic base, especially our ego, would never have accepted it. Our ego will never accept any wrong ideas because it doesn't fit to the logic. And hence, now the paradox is all wrong ideas are good ideas, and all creative ideas are wrong ideas. But our logic does not allow us to accept wrong ideas. So what do? Our logic base will not allow us to accept wrong ideas, but the society, everyone, want us to be creative. And creative means wrong idea. So now we need to break from this paradox. And to break from this paradox, we need to be brave. That's the only way. We need to break the wall, and then we need to jump out of this wall. I mean, we don't have to practically break this wall, because if we break this wall altogether, then we become too wild. Then we may end up in the mental hospital. Why our brothers and sisters ended up in the mental hospital is because they break loose from the logic and they throw all their logic. So when we throw all our logic, we don't have any base to live in this society. So that is why we see them live differently than us. The way they dress, the way they eat, the way they whatever, they are so different from us. So they do not fit the society. And what we do is to send them to the mental hospital for recovery. And in the mental hospital, we actually try to teach them back logic, fill in the logic into their logic base, so that they will be like us again. And then when they have enough logic base, then we release them back into the society. So this is a time to actually, we don't want to break this wall, but what we want to do is to float out so that we can see the wide world just once a while, not all the time, just once a while. And later on we will discuss that actually we only need creativity about 10% of our time. So the other 90% we can keep our logic. Okay, now back to the logical thinking. Logical thinking actually is based on the two stages thinking. And what these two stages thinking? We have the first stage and the second stage. And the first stage is called the soft thinking. The second stage is the hard thinking. What is the difference? The soft thinking involves divergent. And divergent means exploring. So we have to create this habit in thinking of willingness to explore. The second stage is focused on convergent. Convergent means focused thinking. We don't want to waste time in exploring. We just want to narrow down to our objective, the main objective. The problem is a lot of us, because we are in a hurry in thinking, we are in a hurry in study, we are in a hurry in our life. Life is so precious that we are always in a hurry, and we always skip the first stage. So we skip the first stage and we go directly to the second stage. And instead of asking what if, we always end up with asking will it work? And as a result, we are actually confining ourselves. Instead of asking or saying why not, we say can we do it? So always the hard thinking is always challenging new ideas, challenging new possibility. We just want to focus on what can be done, and we want to make decision fast. And that's another main problem with logical thinking, because we are rushing for decision. So we fail to explore. Creative thinking, on the other hand, is basically more focused on the divergent, trying to explore, trying to find all the possibility before we decide. Of course, in the end, we still have to decide, but at least we have more alternative to select. Any question or comment?
Sometimes rush also is good.
Yes, save time, isn't it?
Save time, and then you got to get things done faster.
Yeah, that's basically
Depend on your.
that's the perspective of today's world, because we are in a rush. We are always in a hurry, and later on in creativity, what we want to adopt is what is termed as the spirit of our slogan is.
Because in the office environment sometimes, the bosses sometimes pushing the staff. I mean, late, so slow, things like that. See, can't get things done. So never meet the deadlines and all that. See?
Yeah, but actually, we don't have to be real rush. Our life is so precious. But the precious in life does not mean that we should miss all the opportunity. This proverb that say that smell the roses as you walk along the garden.
As the roses.
But they all complain. They say that today the rose does not smell anymore. Is it something wrong with our nose, or is it something wrong with the rose? Basically, this is I mean, I had this very successful entrepreneur from Miami came and visit me, and I brought him to KL Tower. So we had lunch in KL Tower, 3 hours lunch, very long lunch. Because KL Tower is where you actually have this.
It moves slowly.
Yeah, the tower moves slowly, and you can see the whole KL while you're having lunch. And so he enjoyed so much that he said at the end, "Today I smell the rose in Kuala Lumpur." Because otherwise, you will just see the busy traffic on the road. And this is what you should do sometime. Or find the time to explore, because the impact can be really big. And slow is beautiful is our slogan in creativity. It is not that we want to slow down our thinking, it's just that we want to go step by step so that we have time to explore. And that fits into the first and the second stage in thinking. So we want to apply creativity in our first stage of thinking, then we go into logical thinking in the second stage of thinking. Okay, now we want to relate it with this brain. This is a brain taken from top. You have actually 2 layers, down, on top. So we have the left and the right. Actually, the layer down is controlling your movement, and your body movement. The one on the right is controlling your left part of the body. The one on the left is controlling the right part of the body. But the top here is controlling your thinking. And how does it control? This is how the left brain and right brain work. This was actually discovered by one professor Um, Professor Ornstein, Professor Ornstein and Dr. Roger Sperry. Essentially what they have done was work on over 3,000 students, 3,000 of their students in the Pennsylvania University Medical School, and they give their students different activities and they measure the brain wave. They measure the brain wave just to see which part of the brains were active when they were doing different things. And this is what they discovered. The left brain is basically focusing on the logical thinking, analytic, strategic, control, numbers. So everything that we are doing today, most of things that we are doing today are left brain thinking. And the right brain thinking, on the other hand, are focusing on intuition. What is intuition? Intuition is something that you do not know the reason, but it is there. Sometimes you have the intuition that you have to go down for a while, and suddenly you went down, and suddenly you met somebody that you have to meet, for example. That's intuition. Love, freedom, passion, creative, yearning, peace. And actually, this is the right brain is focusing on things that we have neglected all this while in life. For example, dream. By the way, what happened? Did you were you able to recall your dream? Still now? Oh.
Tried it like twice, but I usually
Forget.
Yeah. Usually I'll do anything else rather than like writing, but did remember for a while, like sitting and sit for a while, then I can remember. But when I start doing something else, then I forget.
Never forget, yes. That's why you have to write. You have to write it. The moment you wake up from your sleep, recall your dream and write. At least you just write the main point. Then the rest, the episode you can recall. But you need to remember the hit point. So dream is one important thing here. Actually, passion, emotion. A lot of us have actually lost our emotion. How do you know that you lost your emotion? Ask yourself, when was the last time you cried? Okay, if you realize that you have not been crying since you were 10 or 12, then you know that you have lost the control of your emotion. Not that you don't have emotion, it's just that you lose control. So, actually the right brain in most of the people are neglected. We neglect our right brain. It's there, and if you still listen to music, if you still for example, watch a movie, at least you may still have 1 or 2% use of your right brain, but the rest is 98% left brain. Okay, this is the issue about our brain. Here is our left brain. Left brain is very systematic. Everybody is working on their cubicle and they are working hard. And here on the right brain, everybody are enjoying themselves. This is basically the picture of what they are trying to create now at Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. And if you go to University of California, Berkeley, just cross the Golden Bridge, you can see that They are university students, they are doing PhD or MBA, but they were lying on the grass, thinking, reading.
Right brain is more
Enjoyable, isn't it?
enjoyable, peaceful.
Yeah.
Great brain.
That can be your dream, isn't it? Okay, now the problem is there is no bridge between the left brain and the right brain. And so the left and the right brains are working in isolation, and this is what we are trying to do. When we are able to think creative and logical at the same time, we create this bridge. And when we create the bridge, we will create an incapacity in thinking. Some of the great people in the world, we have Leonardo da Vinci, who's an artist and at the same time a scientist. He came up with the designs of helicopter, and he came up with his famous Mona Lisa, for example. The same thing we have also in the Muslim tradition. We have the people like Ibn Sina, who is a medical doctor but also a philosopher. We have another person who is also a scientist, but he also invented the gambus, the Muslim community guitar, for example. So this is what Professor Einstein have done, and this is all the list of the left brain. Language. Some people may think that language is the right brain. Actually, it is very logical, so it is left brain thinking. Mathematical formula, logic, numbers, sequence, linearity, analysis, symbol. And when we listen to song, the word of a song is left brain thinking. And the tune of the song is right brain thinking. So listening to music is good, but try to listen to song that have both the lyric and the tune, so that you will try to basically create that bridge. And the right brain also focusing on patterns, form, spatial manipulation. So when you move your muscle, rhythm and musical appreciation, image and picture. Painting is good. We will do an exercise on painting as one of the creative problem solving later. Try and use this. All of us have got talent. It's just a matter of trying to develop that talent. Imagination. Imagination is very important. Imagination is the language in creativity. So without imagination, you can never be creative. So you need to learn, or rather relearn, imagination, color, patterns, emotion, daydreaming, dimension. So all these are right brain. Now, brains are connected. But what is very important also from the experiment that Professor Einstein did was that right now we are using only 2% of our right brain. Only 2% of our right brain. Most adults are only using 2% of our right brain. The rest are left brain. And if we could shift our utilizations of brain, shift from left brain to right brain, every 1% increase in the utilizations of right brain will increase our capacity to think by 5 times. Every 1% increase in the utilizations of the left brain will increase our capacity to think by 5 times. You may ask, how do you measure this capacity of thinking? The measure is in terms of memory, in terms of the idea generation, in terms of the scope in thinking, the breadth in thinking, basically. So you will become a wiser man or a wiser woman when you are able to increase your utilizations of your right brain. Okay. We want to stop that. Then later on after this we will explore balanced thinking approach. Essentially, we don't want to get rid of our logic. We just want to balance it out. So after this we will discuss the balanced thinking approach and then try to apply balanced thinking approach before we go back to creativity and focus on creativity. Alright. So take a break. Very good.